The content provided on this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. While we strive to bring you accurate and up-to-date information, we are not experts in legal or medical matters. Therefore, nothing discussed on this podcast should be interpreted as legal, medical, or professional advice. By tuning in, you acknowledge that the host and any guests featured on this podcast are sharing personal opinions and experiences, and we do not claim to be authorities in any field. We want to empower you, our listeners, to make informed decisions, but ultimately, the responsibility for any actions you take lies with you. We cannot be held liable for the consequences of any decisions made based on information shared on this podcast. Remember, everyone's circumstances are unique, and what works for one person may not work for another. Please use your discretion and seek professional advice when necessary. Welcome back to No One Listens to Me, the podcast where we vent about the absurdities of life. And today we're diving headfirst into the soul-crushing depths of micromanagement. It's like having a boss who's also a creepy shadow, constantly lurking over your shoulder and whispering, "Are you sure you're doing that right?" I'm McGee, your host, and buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to go on a wild ride through the toxic wasteland of workplace control freaks. Now, let's face it, a modern workplace is a minefield. We've got open plan offices designed to stifle productivity, endless meetings that could have been emails, and the ever-present pressure to be on 24/7. But amidst all this chaos, there's one creature that truly sucks the joy out of the daily grind: the micromanager. These overlords of the mundane come in all shapes and sizes. There's the nitpicker, obsessed with every semicolon and font size. Then there's the helicopter boss, constantly hovering and demanding updates every 5 minutes. And let's not forget the control freak, who insists on dictating every single task, no matter how trivial. Now, I will say, the nitpicker obsessed with every semicolon and font size, I have seen a little bit of that in me. I am the proofreader and the editor in all of my positions because spelling and grammar still counts. Punctuation still counts, especially if you are preparing an official, executive, professional document that everyone's going to see. So I get it. I'm just not sure that I like the way some folks have dealt with it when I've been trying to craft some kind of fantastic, magical creation that's going to set the professional world ablaze, and I see a lot of red ink when I know it wasn't necessary. But anyway, I digress. Why do people micromanage? Well, my friends, it often boils down to a crippling lack of trust, a dash of insecurity, and a heaping spoonful of, "I know better than you." These folks are often terrified of losing control, so they cling to power by suffocating their employees with their expertise. So I will tell a story that goes a little bit towards that whole lack of trust, dash of insecurity, and heaping spoonful of "I know better than you." I'm not going to mention any names of the places that I worked, of course, but I can tell you that right before I left what I would consider a very toxic workplace, it had really come down to the fact that I reported to someone who did not understand the industry, had not worked in the particular industry we were working in, and would often come to me phrasing questions like, "Can you put something together that goes into a lot of detail about Project ABC?" And then I would say, "Sure, I can do that." And so I would just write a novel about how Project ABC worked and how it connected to everything in life. And the answer to life was 42, of course. And then I would not really be thanked. And I hear later passing on my knowledge and my work to others as if that person was the expert. That was one of those. We're talking about it. I know better than you. If you work for someone who is a narcissist, micromanager, there's a lot of opportunity for you to get smacked down when you express your opinion based on data, knowledge, gut instinct, because you are overshadowing the narcissist. And the trust thing,
Make one mistake, be the rookie and not understand something, and you will get your hand held over everything all the time. I'm going to tell you one thing that really grinds my gears. I currently have a part-time job. It's a retail part-time job, and I tell you what, that is a complete different animal from working in an office where you're an operations manager, for example. So, in my line of work, in this little part-time job that I have in retail, just like a lot of stores, there's like a customer loyalty or rewards program. In the training, we were told we don't pressure customers to sign up for this rewards program. We don't mention it when they come up to pay for their purchase. We just like to explain what a benefit it is. So the general manager of this retail business is very passionate, of course, as all members of management should be, in making sure we enroll anyone that we can. But I'm just going to tell you right now, if you ask someone, do they want to be in your loyalty program, and they say no, really, you can usually tell by looking at their face and listening to their tone of voice that they're not interested. You could tell them that on the first of every month, loyalty members get breakfast in bed served by their favorite celebrity. And if they don't want the emails and they don't want to be bothered and they don't care about discounts, they're going to say no. So I worked the other day, and when I got into work, there was a little list written down for everybody about what the goals for the day were. Now, listen, I like having measurable goals. I like having SMART goals. And we've talked about SMART goals before, right? So first of all, there's no explanation as to the why. Yes, it's beneficial. Yes, there's bullet points that you can mention about exclusivity and discounts and all kinds of different offers that you might get. But at the end of the day, what are we really doing? We're collecting data about people, and we're making decisions on how we run the business based on the buying habits and what we learn. And then we're deciding what we're going to do with prices and when we're going to have sales and all other kinds of approaches. I understand that. Most retail employees, as far as I know, don't get any kind of compensation for enrolling people in their special programs. I don't even think, if I buy 12 subs and I get one for free, I'm pretty sure the person at the sandwich shop who convinced me to go into that program isn't getting a commission of any kind. Otherwise, I think the workplace and food and retail would be far different because people don't make a lot in those jobs. Have to try to make ends meet, making what, $15 a day maybe if they're lucky. Now I'm on my soapbox, so I'm just going to try to hop back down. Let me finish my story. So the goals for the day were set up in percentages, right? So my goal for the day was to get 30% enrollment in the rewards club, the loyalty club. Okay, great. But what does that mean? So I'll tell you what it means. My boss stood at the counter, cash wrap counter, and broke this down for me, right? So instead of what one of the managers does, which is just say flat out, get 3, get 4, get 5, whatever, it was 30%. So this was the explanation I got, and this is how it sounded. So what does this mean? Okay, so this means for every 10 sales you have, you can get 7 no's and 3 yeses for signing up. That's what 30% goal means. Okay, first of all, I'm not 12. I learned all of that pretty much, I think, by 8th grade, how percentages work, especially when you're using a nice round number like 10. And I don't want to argue with you, but that's not actually how it works because you're not taking into account that in those 10 sales, I might actually encounter 10 people who are already in the program. So you're not comparing the total sales to the numbers of no's and yeses. You have to look at the folks that are eligible, and out of those that were eligible, how many were yeses, basically. So I ended up at 40% for the day. But I had to fight for that because I had to explain math. So there's a couple things at work, right? You can't just trust your people to do what they can do, to offer the option, explain the benefits, and then move on through the transaction if the person says no. And not only that, but you have to give them a goal that your performance is going to be judged on, and you don't even know how reliable the data is going to be and who's doing the math and all of that lived in the house that Jack built. So I'm going to kind of just shut down all of the other questionable practices that I've heard be recommended in how we go about getting people to enroll in the loyalty program. But it's like the pieces of flair from Office Space. Oh, so I need to wear a minimum of 15 pieces of flair, but the guy that you just pointed out being the best guy here has about 1,000,000 pieces of flair, so wear more or what? And the statement was, well, all we're saying is some people wear more than the minimum pieces of flair. Okay, thanks for answering the question. So it's really great when you're trained on something, told that something isn't as important, focus on the benefits to people, and then that we don't employ high pressure tactics. Okay, I get it. So how we were trained, what we were told doesn't actually apply. Okay, that's happened in pretty much every job I've ever had. Another thing that grinds my gears about working in this retail job, and actually I wasn't supposed to do this podcast. In my head, I planned this just to talk about professional, not that a retail store isn't a professional organization. I mean, in the office, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, all of those experiences I've had. But anyway, let me continue on my rant for a second. So sometimes you work at a retail place and you are encouraged to empower yourself to fix things, make adjustments, kind of go on the fly, especially if you're like the only one there for 4 or 5 hours because they can't staff properly. So if you see a display, if you see you're out of stock on something, if you notice something is not quite set up the way it's supposed to be, you should be able to go and make that decision on your own to clean up, restock, reorder, and make things look a little bit nicer for the customers that are coming in to look at all of your stuff, right? So same day with a 30% explanation, as if I was 12, I made the decision to move some items that were on display right in front of the register into a container that would hold these extra items that we were selling because the stand that we had the items on wasn't stable enough, and a customer would touch the merchandise and then it would all collapse like, a house of cards. So I made the decision to put the merchandise in a square container where people could still reach them, but they weren't toppling over all the time for the rest of the employees to have to fix constantly. So the same guy, same boss, comes over and he's like, I thought we had these on a different display. And I'm like, well, that display is over there. But every time you looked at the items or you breathed on them or touched them, they would collapse. So I talked to, and then I name dropped senior level employee there. And she said she was pretty sure the original idea wasn't going to work. It's not working. It was okay to find something else to use. So then do you know what happened? Not even in secret, not even to be inconspicuous. He went over to the person whose name I dropped to confirm that she told me to do that. At that point, I'm just like, really? You don't trust me? It's working. It's way better than what we had before. I'm sorry that your idea wasn't the right idea, but this is better for everyone. And so if you can't trust your people to make good decisions and carry out the objectives that you've given for them in the job, go talk to the customer, engage with them, try to figure out what their needs are, find other things that they could also use so that when they leave, they've gotten a full sense of satisfaction and they don't have to come back and get additional items because you took care of that for them. No, it's better to spend your time questioning the decisions of your employees that are already working fine because you don't feel like you can trust them. Or here's what I would probably say in this situation, you don't particularly care for that person. That's really what's at work here. We're two very different personalities. And for some reason, you can flatter me and say great things about me when you need me to stay extra or come in early or do something that's not really part of my job. But then once I've done whatever it is your bidding is, you're back to not liking me, not trusting me, refusing to think that I could have good ideas. Have you ever felt that way? Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're going through that. And you know what? I don't know what the right answer is all the time because I will have a tendency to say things that in the moment are not filtered and are not kind. And I'm just like everybody else. I would like to have an income stream, so I don't want to come off as insubordinate. But at the same time, I talk about this all the time. There's no self awareness on the part of the other person. And what you're trying to do is say, I know that you probably don't mean to come across this way, but, I'm 45 years old. I understand how to calculate metrics. I worked in a metric measuring environment. And I feel like you're being very condescending to me when you talk to me with that tone and you break it down like you have. Try that. It's a lot better than, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm not a stupid idiot. And I think I probably could run this place without needing any help from you. So get off my case, right? That's probably not going to work. Okay, so why do people micromanage? Well, we talked about why, covered that, I think, as well as we could for now. And I was just talking about self-awareness. So, well, really lack of self-awareness. And I talk about self-awareness all the time. Micromanagers often have zero clue how their behavior impacts others. They genuinely believe they're being helpful, while their employees are slowly dying inside. And this disconnect between perception and reality creates a toxic breeding ground for resentment, anxiety, and good old-fashioned misery. So how do you deal with these soul-sucking supervisors? Well, it's tricky. You can try setting boundaries, communicating your needs, and even offering gentle feedback. But let's be real, sometimes the only escape is a good old-fashioned I quit. In fact, micromanagement is one of the top reasons people flee their jobs faster than a cheetah on Red Bull. And to any leaders out there who might be micromanaging, let me be blunt. Stop it. Your behavior is damaging your team, stifling creativity, and creating a workplace where people dread coming to work. Give your employees some autonomy, trust their abilities, and focus on the bigger picture. You might be surprised of the results. Okay, so I don't do a lot on LinkedIn, being a semi-retired person who also owns a business and has a little part-time job. But when I go on there, in my feed, on any given day, you can find probably 3 to 5 posts from professionals, many of them in HR, about toxic work environments. So I found something just today, just went into the search bar, toxic work environment, and found an article of all things. Well, of course, there's going to be articles on LinkedIn, right? Am I an idiot? So this one is for employers. People managers are the first line of defense against toxicity. And this actually was posted by Blay and Zeitlin, certified public accountants. For some reason, I got it in my feed. So some important things that I see here in this, it's in the info center. So is it a blog? I think it's just maybe a blog, October 11th, 2024. No matter size nor mission, all employers must work proactively to prevent toxic work environments. Headline. Failing to do so means it's likely only a matter of time before bad things happen, with possibilities ranging from the departure of good employees to bad publicity to costly legal action. The danger of unchecked toxicity was highlighted in a survey jointly conducted earlier this year by Intoo, INTOO, all caps, an HR solutions provider and workplace intelligence, a thought leadership and research agency. Okay, so in this survey, 1,600 full-time U.S.-based employees were surveyed. 35% said they'd accept a lower-paying job to free themselves from a toxic work environment. Now, I'm here to tell you, in the last job that I had, I was very well compensated. However, that compensation at times seemed like a little tiny drop in the bucket compared to all of the negative aspects of working there, starting just with the commute and the fact that they liked to call themselves a hybrid schedule workplace, but working from home on Fridays only is not hybrid. So, and that's kind of like the first chink in the armor when it comes to selling yourselves as a great place to work. You can't say hybrid to people these days if you're not allowing work from home at least 3 days a week. It depends on who you ask out there. It could be 4 days a week, but it was backwards at this place. 4 days in the office, 1 day from home. And you know that 35%, based on the number of people who did the survey, that's like 35% of the workforce, right? A third of your workforce would leave you based on how toxic it is in your workplace. The potential of that should scare everyone, the employees and the employer, because for employees, if that third of your workforce were to leave today, just get up and walk out, what's going to happen to those that are left? I mean, they already know the answer. Do you, as the manager, supervisor, whoever you are? I mean, what a threat that prospect is to every employer's productivity and stability, right? That's outlined right in this article. I don't think there's anybody who works at a company for a couple of years or even more who says the workplace got suddenly very toxic. It's really something that develops slowly. It's not even very loud, and it could be sprinkled in different departments and then just kind of ooze its way around, especially if you have bad actors in the toxic space in a specific department and they end up getting moved somewhere else and they just continue to carry on those same practices wherever they go. And it is hard to catch initially. The article talks about at a macro level, you can't really see it happening. But if you have, this is what the article refers to, people managers, they can be there to kind of be the in-between voice of reason, line of defense, so to speak, when it comes to conflicts that lead to toxic work environments, for example. And then the article goes on to outline that there are some other statistics showing a problem. So in a September 2024 blog post, which is mentioned in the article, global leadership development firm DDI stated its assessments of more than 70,000 manager candidates reveal that nearly half, so like a 49%, lack effective conflict management skills. When I really start thinking about that, I think about things that I know, like how the different generations behave in the workplace. Now, I'm a Gen Xer. I just got really close to the mic just to grab a ball to throw for my dog. Isn't that ridiculous? Okay, so I'm a Gen Xer, and I know pretty much how most of us are at work. We want to come in. We want to do our work. Yes, it would be nice to be praised about it, but we're just here to get it done. We don't need any of your other stuff. But also, we don't deny issues or conflicts. And if you grow up in a company that invests money in getting supervised the training they need to know how to be supervisors, up frontline supervisors, mid to senior level, you name it, whatever, there's a foundation for how to deal with conflict. Some people have a formula, they give it an acronym, coaching for performance, behavior, whatever it is. But I can guarantee you that none of that training that you would pay to put your management folks through says, if you avoid a problem, it will go away on its own. First of all, that doesn't say it. And secondly, it's not going to say, do whatever the person above you wants you to do and use that as the reason why you're doing it. So there's no place in conflict resolution, in threatening that the people above have asked for it, in walking by bad behaviors, or not trying to help people get better with performance management. And the answer isn't start doing their job for them. It's not get out the stick, but forget about the carrot and just start beating people with the stick. It's a combination of techniques that speak directly to your willingness to see improvement in numbers, behaviors, whatever, by focusing on the root cause and getting to it. And then if you've got conflicts on your team, 2 people, 3 people, everybody, ignoring it or painting the whole entire team with the same brush will not serve you well. I've worked with Other generations too, right? I've worked with baby boomers, plenty of those, and they're not easy to work with. And, millennials. And the next what is that, Generation Z? I can't remember. But everyone handles conflict differently based on what their how they were raised, what their current culture is like. What is their schooling background? What is this their first job, second job, whatever? And I noticed that sometimes there are folks in the workplace that are younger than me who just will avoid conflict at all costs and will avoid doing things that seem hard at all cost. For example, at the place that I work, retail, we all have a locker. We all started on the same day. Everybody got the same little dial combination lock. And it was like 2 months into the job when one of the coworkers who was in her very early 20s, I said, why do you have a different lock on your locker? And it was one that she brought in herself that just had the numbers, individual numbers, like a 4-digit code that you could set because she couldn't figure out how to work the regular combination lock, turn to the left, turn to the right, go over the number twice, go back, stop. She didn't want to take the time to learn how to do it. So she just brought in something that worked for her. One, she's a self-advocate, right? She didn't ask anybody to do it for her. She didn't ask for the company to buy her something better. She just went out and solved the problem on her own. But this was the kind of behavior that you would see from her often, where she would try to do something any of us could teach her. And when we started to explain some of the steps, she was just like, that sounds like too much work, and would kind of give it up. And I had another coworker. He did the same thing. And we kind of let him get by with it. He didn't know where to find anything. He couldn't really help the customers. He had no product knowledge. He just kind of hid the best that he could and didn't want to take the time to learn the soft skills that were necessary. Now, were they in management roles? No. But anybody in that age group, not just somebody working in a retail job that gets very busy seasonally and just has its share of challenges, those folks are in the workforce. They majored in business. They majored in whatever field of study they think is going to be the field they want to work in, and they got a job. But once they get into a management role, are you spending the time training them the right way to manage people? And then are they advocates for you as their boss? Or are they that kind of wall that goes in between the employees and the other folks that are ahead of the manager? I hope that makes sense. Oops. Let me just get some BART control going. So tangents is what I do, but let's get back to this article. So the organization's Global Leadership Forecast 2023 found that only 30% of more than 15,500 HR professionals and leaders surveyed worldwide felt confident about managing workplace conflict. Wow. If you're an HR professional and you're a leader, and I'm talking about maybe above manager, like director and above, and you don't feel confident, 70% did not feel confident about managing workplace conflict. How did we get here? Because I can tell you, in the 30 plus years I worked for a pretty big company, and that, if you're doing the math, that starts in the early 90s. Nobody had an issue with handling conflict. Times have changed, so we kind of had to maybe tone it down a little bit with some of the ways that we handled corrective action. But other than that, nothing was ever ignored. Everyone was addressed. Sometimes it took a long time for a performance issue to really mean we're giving up on you and we can't keep you. But for the most part, it was head on. I had bosses, though, who hated conflict so much. And we're just talking about like a small team of like 5 or 6 people. They would just let all of these issues simmer. And like literally one day, like walk away one day, 2 people on your team are getting into it. One of them ends up slapping the other one across the face. And everybody on the team goes to HR, it gets interviewed and says, absolutely, these 2 people on my team were constantly at each other. They were angry at each other. They got into a tiff and it just went too far. And I can tell you the reason why that was going on was because our supervisor paid no attention to it. She did not want to deal with it, but it was happening all the time. I mean, how can you even at that point be mad at the person who slapped the other person when it was boiling under the surface and it was ignored by the supervisor. So I can tell you in a milder example on conflict, it does no good to just let it smolder over in the corner and then come back after ignoring it all that time and be surprised that it's fully engulfed. More training on workplace conflict, and not workplace conflict resolution from the 90s, but today, because whoa, lots of changes in today. So some best practices that were mentioned in this article: clear message for employers. Managers need to identify, address, and resolve conflicts competently and confidently. If yours can do so, you'll be much more likely to mitigate or avoid toxic work environments. Now, I'm thinking when I'm reading this that it's easier said than done. And of course, it's the sentence after that was the exact same: easier said than done, no doubt. But here are two big picture ways to address this issue. So let's dive into some of the at least the two suggested ways to deal with it. I've gone over this many times, and I have trained people on how to handle it too. And that is, you have to establish clear organizational policies and procedures. Because, as the article points out, and I just said, toxicity does nothing but grow and become uglier the more it is left alone. If you're not checking on it, if you're not making sure there's checks and balances in place, and that it's clear and everyone understands the consequences of not following it, if you don't do any of those things, then you cannot stop 3 months from now and say, I came into work today and all hell has broken loose and I probably can't find a container big enough to put it in, right? So if you don't do that, you're only going to have yourself to blame when shit goes bad, right? Shit gets real. I'm going to use the word shit one more time to say you'll come in one day and you'll have a total shit show. You have to have a clearly worded, clearly advertised, easy for everyone to see, sign, acknowledge policies, obviously against discrimination, harassment, bullying. We do a really good job, I think, of making those policies, putting them in writing, making people sign them and acknowledge that they've read them and understand them. And then we know how to see the big, blatant, obvious violations of policy, but we don't know how to deal with the subtle violations of the policy. So let's say you have those policies in place. You get your language right. You've got house counsel or somebody that can say, this is exactly what's going to help you. You need to put this in writing. And you need to review them regularly as well and make revisions based on what's changing in the climate of the world, any recent case law regarding how, regarding how you're supposed to handle things. Sometimes the law can change, and so you have to be compliant with that. And then you have to report any clear violations, right? And then the other point that's made is you have to train managers when you bring them in and continue to train them so that they feel confident and they have the ability to handle conflicts. And you just don't train them and then say goodbye, good luck. Be involved in difficult conversations at the beginning with your newest people. Know your people well enough to say, I need to do some role plays. We need to continue to review something more current with the entire staff once a month, that kind of thing. And don't think that toxicity can be kept at bay just by doing that too. Especially if you're on your socials and you're seeing people putting out these videos like, hey, I used to work at, Joe's coffee shop and this is how they treat all of their people and this is what we're supposed to do and we have to turn a blind eye to discrimination, blah, blah, blah. Pay attention to what employees pay attention to what employees are saying out there in the world. They're not screaming into the void. They are shouting to a group of people who feel their pain, or maybe don't feel their pain, but they know the next thing something like they're describing comes up, they're going to be the one to put their feet down and take it as high as they want to. Article ends with, at the end of the day, you've got to choose people managers wisely and give them the support they need to nurture positive, inclusive working environments. Check in with yours regularly and reward them for meeting organizational goals, for maintaining a healthy, productive, and consciously non-toxic culture. When I read this article, it comes across to me as if the person at the very top is without blame and doesn't really have any day-to-day involvement that would indicate a contribution to the toxic environment. But I have to say, the whoever you are, the CEO, the AVP, the SVP, whatever your three initials are that give you the power, you cannot be the source of the toxicity that trickles down to everyone else. Even in a small company like 50 people or less, 100 people or less, whatever small looks like to you, CEOs can get their fingers in the middle of all of the pies if they want to. And if they are micromanaging helicopter bosses, for example, I sent this to you 5 minutes ago. Why isn't it done? And remember, I have cautioned people who are go-getters and overachievers in starting out with a record of being done with a project early, on time, high quality, not encouraging anybody to be a slacker. But I will say, building expectations is going to get you even higher expectations. So talking though, again, about the helicopter boss, how do you get past that? Well, one of the things you have to do as just a general employee, you have to build your own expectations. Understand what the deadline is, and in your responses, if there's a status check in between the assignment and when you're supposed to have it done, you have to find a way to phrase without sounding annoyed or being disrespectful to say, this is still an ongoing project. As I said, I'm going to have this done for you next Tuesday. If there's anything that you're thinking of that you would like to be included, let me know. Otherwise, I will respond to you by Tuesday with the completed project. And there's helicoptering, right? And then there's just downright sabotaging. So what I'm talking about, I'll give you an example. You are the highest up on the food chain in a company, and there's one person who's 2 steps below you, but in a leadership role, an expert. That's why you hired them. And in the past, there have been some slip-ups. Things have been late. There were sections of a report that maybe had inaccurate data because it was maybe pulled from the wrong part of the chart, whatever the case may be. And so that particular incident then turned you, the highest on the food chain, into someone who will throw a wrench into pretty much everything from that point on. Okay, you've got, that person's like, okay, so you have to get this done by the end of the month. Okay, great. 2 or 3 days go by. Oh, by the way, can you also include this information? 3 days later, can I see what you have so far? Then you do that. Then you get it back. Not only has what you've written so far displeased them, but now they've just decided on a whim, okay, I think I switched roles. So now, leader, CEO, top of the food chain, you have decided you don't really explain the why. So I'm going to say on a whim that you would like numbers reported differently. You would like to have the table redone. You think that we should confer with someone from the outside before we make the statement about the data analysis because you're not really sure if it's right. Now, you don't have the expertise of this person you hired specifically for that job, but you just don't think that person's right. What are you doing? What are you doing? This person doesn't have a history of turning anything in late. In fact, this person is usually early with what they do. And then if there's something that you want changed, if it's part of if this is like a rote report and it's done the same way and it's like a template and it's formatted the same, can you really be angry if suddenly something that person is prepared in that report is just not what you want to see? Now you're curious. You want to know more. One, can this wait until the next quarter and have actually some discussion on it? Or are you just going to go in there with tracking changes on and then add all of these little comments like, I expected you to do this. I'm surprised you didn't have this. Can we learn more about this? That's not even an in-person discussion. You don't even have a moment where you pull the person aside and say, listen, I know you worked really hard on this. I'm just in this place right now where I feel like I'm going to have to tell the powers that be more, or I feel like we've got to make some pretty quick changes. Can I see more data from you? Whatever. No, you're just sitting behind your computer like a little coward saying, this isn't what I want to see. I want to see something else. Oh, and before I wanted all the numbers to be 2 numbers after the decimal point. Now I just want them to be 1. Are you nitpicking and helicoptering just to be a helicoptering nitpicker? Because somewhere the person writing that report got sideways with you and it's just never going to be easy for them. I'm assuming in this whole example that somebody is, maybe has a malicious bone in their body, or maybe might be a narcissist and just can't let other people outshine them. That may not be the case for everyone. There may be no malicious intent. You might just feel out of control in your own life. You might be answering to people. They're, figuratively pointing a gun at your feet and telling you to dance. And so now it's going to come down on everybody. This cannot happen. It's not okay for people to suffer because you personally have an aspect of your personality that's causing you to want to control at least one thing in your world right now, in your life. And that thing has to be what employee number 4 over there is doing, or what department 123 is doing right now, because they've got to be the cause of all the angst and all of the issues going on with the company. So I just hit refresh to update my LinkedIn, and you bet, you guessed, absolutely right. There was a post. So this is a post for someone that I am following, and it says follow for daily posts on business and personal growth from this particular person. So this is employees, you deserve better, 12 signs of a toxic boss and 5 steps to freedom. Now, it's just somebody's opinion, right? Don't let a toxic work environment erode your self-worth. If your boss exhibits these 12 red flags, it's time to prioritize your well-being. 12 toxic boss behaviors. I only mentioned like 3 categories, but here we go. 1, constant criticism without constructive feedback. Note, right? Note, you can give criticism in a different form than what you're used to. And your idea of constructive feedback is not everyone's idea of constructive feedback. And the name of the game, which I've mentioned many times, is you're managing people, but it's not, okay, I'm the new sheriff in town and this is how I work and this is what you're going to have to get used to. No, you have to adapt to your people. So constant criticism, no constructive feedback. Taking credit for my work or taking credit for your work, meaning your boss is taking credit for your work. I've seen that happen to me. Micromanagement that stifles creativity. Personally, I can tell you, I'm neurodivergent. I continually have all of these ideas just occur to me in the middle of whatever I might be doing. And I either stop and act on it, or I have to make a note and I want to do those things. But I tell you what, if you've got somebody who is on your case all the time, justified or not, you are going to stop just like I did. You're just going to hop off the fun committee. You are just going to no longer share anything that you think would be good, whether it's morale in the office or something related to improving performance and making the company better. Unpredictable mood swings affecting the workplace. 100%. I will tell you that back in the day when 360-degree surveys were out, I was in management for decades and would get these every year. And I already knew one of the pieces of feedback I was going to get is that I want to think of how it was worded. It had something to do with handling stress or something, or just my demeanor in general when things were chaotic, I guess. And I didn't score very high there. I didn't score abysmally low, but I knew, and I started to get better about realizing, not forgetting myself, knowing where I was when things were taking place that weren't making me very happy, and not having that spill over onto other people. That can be confused sometimes, though. If you're very direct and you're like, let's cut to the chase and summarize this and get on. Sometimes people might think that's a mood swing, but most of the time I've been sitting there listening to everybody talk and toss all kinds of ideas around until they circled back to the beginning. And I've just been like, okay, let's stop. You do this, and I'll do this, and we'll meet again later. For some reason, that's not an attribute people like, especially if they're the ones that wanted to delay the meeting by 20 more minutes. But I digress, right? Unpredictable mood swings affecting the workplace. We know what those are like. Gaslighting or dismissing your concerns. Oh my gosh, gaslighting, just like toxic, is thrown around here a lot. And so I don't like to overuse the word gaslighting, but I have experience with becoming so frustrated and upset because someone to whom I reported was playing games like that with me. Absolutely 100%. And the concerns I had weren't real. What I was going through wasn't serious. All of that stuff. You name it. I never said this. You never said that. Why would I ever do that? Those are, get away immediately when that happens. All right, we're on this list of 12. I'm going to get through it faster. Playing favorites and creating office politics. Because this is for you leaders. Don't do these things, right? Withholding information crucial for your job. Public humiliation or belittling. Ooh, wow. Resistance to your growth or advancement. Blaming others for their own mistakes. Creating a culture of fear and intimidation. I left a place where that was basically the vibe all the time. Fear and intimidation. If you recognize these signs, remember, it's you. No, I'm kidding. It's not you, it's them. So if you are the employee, you're looking at those signs, it's not you, it's the leader. So how do you, as the employee, reclaim your worth? So the article, the post from Dan Murray Serter says, document everything. Keep a record of incidents and interactions. This protects you and validates your experience. We've all worked with the record keeper. Sometimes they go overboard, but I understand the purpose of documenting everything. Build a support network. Connect with trusted colleagues. Seek mentorship outside your direct reporting line. First of all, if you want to have a mentor at work, if it's a big organization, you can find one, definitely, that's not within your hierarchy. But if you're in a small place and you're in leadership of any kind, who are you going to use as your mentor that's not your boss or your boss's boss, or isn't plugged in politically in the leadership that if you went to them for support, you would actually get support? People have a habit of saying, I absolutely understand. The same thing is happening to me. I just hate it so much. I wish it wasn't this way. I'm mad just like you are. And then 5 minutes later, they're in somebody else's office telling them exactly what you said. So you just have to be careful. Get outside of your direct reporting line for a mentor, or get somebody who doesn't work there, who is in management or in the same line of work that you do, who can help you with it. Focus on self-development. Number 3, invest in skills that enhance your marketability. Attend industry events to expand your network. 4, set clear boundaries. Learn to say no to unreasonable demands. I keep saying it. I keep saying it. I keep saying it. Protect your mental health above all. 5, explore new opportunities. Update your resume and LinkedIn profile. Can't say enough how hard it is right now to stay on top of what kind of resumes are going to get you interviewed. Okay, so moving on, just some notes about the high cost of a toxic work environment. When you are in a toxic work environment, here are some of the common traits of a toxic work environment. Disrespect. So you're going to see disrespectful behavior in the workplace. It comes in many forms, but you'll know it when you see it. Lack of inclusivity. A non-inclusive work environment can have pretty serious consequences. Employees can feel marginalized or unvalued and very disconnected from the rest of the team. And you know what comes after that. You're isolated, so your morale is low and you don't feel motivated. Unethical leadership. So I could see how that would be one of those huge red flags that once you see it, you can't unsee it and you don't want to be part of it. You're a good person and you absolutely have high integrity. And so then you're in a position where the person you could challenge or blow the whistle on would probably retaliate, and you're on the fence about what you should do. It's never a bad thing to do the right thing. Other signs you're in a toxic work environment include cutthroat competition, and sometimes your management will actually spur that on, stir the pot even more, and increase that to the point where it's unbearable. Abuse, and you know this is not something that you can take lightly or ignore. You have to take action when there's abusive behavior that's against companies' regulations and policies, obviously. So even though a toxic work environment can go unnoticed by people at the top, but the people at the top might actually be the power to course correct, like I said, are often the leaders that reinforce the problem. And if you don't know how to make the change, you can always consult with someone in the industry, find someone that you can maybe have a coaching call or a workshop with, encourage improvement in health production, respect, inclusivity, ethical behavior, and mutual support. So know where to go, know what your options are. And then if you're one of the record keepers, which you're going to have to be at some point, if you're trying to change your toxic work environment, you're going to have to keep good records, because once you notify someone who can intervene and maybe investigate what's happening at your work, the next thing you have to worry about is that shoe that drops with retaliation. And it shows up in very vague ways sometimes, but that's my advice. So, this podcast is called No One Listens to Me. And so I'm going to rant for just a minute. I am in a couple of Facebook groups that are designed to notify people of different kind of work from home opportunities. And then one of the posts that I see regularly are folks going in there and saying, I got a job at such and such company. It's remote and it's on the phones. Oh my gosh, it's so awful. We have to have our cameras on all the time. And I really need to have a job because I have a baby and I can't afford daycare, and so on and so forth. Here's the thing, a work from home job does not mean a take care of your baby at home while you are working job. It's really not possible to be the responsible parent and attentive parent that you want to be and still be good at your job, especially when you're talking about being newly hired and how your attendance is extremely important in that first 90 days. Being on camera, attentive, paying attention, not having anyone around you who might be able to look on your computer and see highly confidential information or something that is very sensitive about the company. And if you are working with an expectation that you're going to be 100% devoted to the work you're doing, and that's the way it's supposed to be, you're going to have to make a difficult decision about whether you do want that job or what you're going to do with your child when you are working 9 to 5, etc. And your before and after school kids and all of that stuff. What you're looking for is a job that values flexibility and no need to basically punch a time card, and something you can do in your spare time. And that is not really going to exist in a full-time job that pays well. And trying to find a way to manipulate the system is in the end going to result in you probably losing that job. And also, if you post for a job, you apply for a job, you get several offers from different companies, don't go on your Facebook page and start a thread where you're basically like, well, what should I do? Should I accept job A, B, or C? Maybe I'll try to do all three jobs. It's extremely tone deaf of someone to do that when the whole group consists of people who are looking for jobs, whether you're looking to just have a job or, like you mentioned before, have that work-life balance that you think you're going to have. It does not help at all to tell somebody you got 3 job offers and that you're actually thinking about not turning down any of them. Come on, man, leave some for the rest of us. And that's it. Thanks for being here. You know how great I think you guys are. And until the next time, make sure that you're nice to yourself. Talk soon. Bye.